Hey everyone, and welcome to our channel, EAI, Resources for the Ice Age. My name is Yesenia Martinez, and I'm an educator and counselor in the Elgin area. Today, I want to share what I believe could be a very meaningful professional learning community, or PLC, opportunity for educators across grade levels and roles. A PLC is a collaborative group of educators who come together to study a topic, reflect on professional practices, engage in dialogue, and identify ways to better support students and improve learning environments. This particular PLC opportunity is centered around the book Drawing Deportation, Art and Resistance Among Immigrant Children by Silvia Rodriguez Vega, which is the book that I'm sharing here on the screen. I believe this book has the potential to create powerful conversations among teachers, counselors, social workers, administrators, bilingual staff, and anyone working directly with students and families. If I could draw a Crane poem now, I would paint us blue, shivering in the cell, and Fernanda with a crowbar, knocking down guards, breaking open the lock that keeps us trapped. By Ida Salazar, Crowbar Blue. I wanted to begin with that poem because I think it captures something deeply important about this conversation: the power of storytelling, art, resistance, and the emotional realities many children carry silently. And this is also a poem that our author starts with in this book. This book is not simply about immigration policy. It's about children, their fears, their resilience, their identities, their hopes, and the ways they communicate emotions that adults sometimes overlook. As educators, I think this book challenges us to reflect on an important question. What are our students carrying emotionally that we may never fully see? One of the most powerful things about this book is that it centers children's artwork, and storytelling. Rodriguez Vega spent years working with immigrant children and analyzing the drawings they created about deportation, family separation, fear, belonging, survival, and hope. And some of the drawings are honestly heartbreaking. You will see helicopters, fences, police, cages, crying families, crying children, and separation imagery. But you also see resistance, love, resilience, imagination, and strength. And I have a couple here that I will show you. I also have here the content, the content of the book, showing you what each chapter covers. What stood out to me the most was how this book reminds us that children often communicate visually before they can verbalize what they're feeling emotionally. Sometimes behavior is communication, as some of you yes may already know that. Sometimes silence is communication. And sometimes artwork is communication. And in schools, we may unintentionally miss those messages if we only focus on academics, compliance, or discipline. As educators, this book feels especially relevant because many of our schools serve a beautifully diverse community, including immigrant, bilingual, multilingual, and mixed statuses families. From elementary through high school, we work with students who may be carrying experiences connected to migration, fear, identity, belonging, language, separation, or cultural navigation, right? Navigating between two homes and cultures and different things like that. And even when students are not directly impacted by deportation fears or ICE in the community, they're still growing up hearing conversations around immigration in media, politics, communities, and sometimes even inside schools. This book helps educators better understand how those experiences can impact emotional regulation, trust with adults, classroom participation, academic performance, peer relationships, attendance, and overall sense of safety and belonging. For elementary teachers, the book is especially important because younger children often communicate emotions through drawing, play, and behavior long before they can verbalize complex feelings. For middle school educators, it connects strongly to identity development, peer belonging, emotional regulation, and the increased social awareness students begin developing during adolescence. And now for high school staff, the book opens important conversations around advocacy, identity, student voice, mental health, and the long-term emotional impact of feeling unseen or misunderstood in educational spaces. And so, as I mentioned, this is a great opportunity for a PLC. I recently completed a PLC centered around this book titled Teaching in Times of Fear, Supporting Immigrant Students Through Art. And so this PLC centered around the book, and we explored the book Drawing Deportation to better understand how fear, displacement, resilience, and identity surface through student artwork and narratives, while also reflecting on trauma-informed, culturally responsive, and affirming practices that can help schools become safer, and more supportive environments for immigrant and mixed status students. One major theme throughout the book is that immigrant children are not passive victims. They are storytellers. They are artists, observers, protectors, advocates, meaning makers. Their artwork becomes a form of resistance and healing. And another important takeaway is the role that schools play in either creating belonging or reinforcing fear. The author really pushes educators to think critically about how schools respond to immigrant families, whose stories are represented in curriculum, how discipline practices affect vulnerable students, and whether students truly feel emotionally safe in school spaces. Sorry. This book also reminds us that creative expression matters, right? So this is something that I really liked about this book, that oftentimes our students will struggle to use words to tell us what's happening, but through other expressive ways, they're able to tell us. And so art, writing, storytelling, music, play, theater, these are not extra things. right? For many children, these are survival tools. And this also goes for those of you that maybe can run a club after school, right? These things matter to students because they're able to express themselves through those activities, after school activities, whether it is an art club or a theater club, music club, allowing them to story tell. And so if your team or school decides to use this book for a PLC or a book study, staff study, there are a few sections I highly recommend highlighting. Okay. First, the introduction in early chapters, because they establish why children's drawings matter and how they communicate emotional experiences. Second, the sections focus on fear and family separation. Those chapters really help educators understand how chronic stress impacts children emotionally and academically. I also recommend showcasing some of the drawings involving helicopters, as you see on the screen, fences, cages, and separation imagery, because they visually capture what many children are processing internally. And finally, the ending chapters that focus on healing, resistance, and hope, because the book does not leave readers in despair, right? It reminds us that the resilience children carry and the powerful role schools can play in healing. There are also two pieces in this book that deeply stayed with me, and they're towards the end of the book. And I'd like to share them because I think they capture the emotional and just the cultural heart of this work. The first is Art as an Offering by Bell Hooks and Amalia Mesa Baines, Homegrown. People of color are denied access to art for the fear that if they get their hands on it, they'll write their own stories and understand the value of their lives. What I appreciate about this piece is how it frames art not simply as creativity, but as power, as identity, as healing, as resistance. And I think as educators, that is such an important reminder, because when students are given opportunities to tell their stories, express themselves, and feel seen, they begin to understand the value of their voices and the value of their lives. The second piece I want to share is El Siquisirri, Laguna Prieta. Divino cielo, te ruego permiso para cantar. Me persigno luego y empiezo por saludar. Agua, tierra, viento y fuego. This piece feels deeply rooted in culture, spirit, ancestry, and connection. To me, it serves as a reminder that our students bring entire histories, traditions, language, stories into our classrooms every single day. And part of our responsibility as educators is creating spaces where those identities are honored, protected, and welcomed. And then here I have the back portion of the book, which is, you have the front cover here. And then this is the back that I have. So if you're a school or a team planning to use this book for a PLC, here are a few discussion questions that I would recommend or suggest using for meaningful conversations. How might immigration-related stress show up in students' behavior or academic performance? In what ways do students communicate emotions nonverbally? What does emotional safety actually look like in our classrooms? How can schools become spaces of healing rather than additional stress? What messages do immigrant students receive about whether they belong in our schools? I think one of the most important reminders from this book is this: students are always communicating something. The question is whether we are truly listening. Drawing Deportation challenges us to move beyond assumptions and see students more fully, more compassionately, and more humanely. And honestly, I believe that matters now more than ever. Thank you for joining me on EAI, Resources for the Ice Age. Again, my name is Yesenia Martinez, and I'm an educator and counselor in the area. If your team has read this book or plans to use it for a PLC, we would love to hear from you.